This video is part of the Grenfell Tower Fire series. You can find more related links below. Here are some basic facts about the event. The public housing tower building had 24 levels, 124 flats and 227 bedrooms. The residents were predominantly poor or ordinary working class people, including some refugees, the elderly, disabled people, individuals, families of children, and people of varied ethnic backgrounds such as Muslim, Malaysian, Moroccan, Syrian, and so on. Kensington, the area where Grenfell Tower is one of the richest places in Britain, and they say even in the world. And this tower was one of the old, ugly, neglected council-run social housing buildings, sandwiched between luxurious apartments owned by the extremely wealthy. The fire was said to initially be caused by a fridge exploding in a flat, I think on the 4th floor, but some people question whether that was indeed true. The fire spread unusually rapidly, and that was proved to be because of the cladding fitted onto the exterior of the building for solely aesthetic purposes as part of a regeneration program that the government put in place, and I'll discuss that further on. It continued to burn for 60 hours, this fire. Many people were hopelessly trapped. People, children were desperately waving material, at the windows, flashing torches, putting their hands on the windows and screaming literally for help. But they were told repetitively to stay inside their flats. In desperation, a baby and other children were being thrown out of windows by their parents, and there were some adult jumpers as well, so people jumping out of the building, obviously in total desperation, because either you are on fire or you jump to your death, and this was, a large building. Secret information was revealed to a local that a firefighter who was known in the community saw around 42 dead bodies alone in one room of both adults and children. They were all squashed and heaped together. Obviously, in desperation, they, were trapped in a room. Many survivors, and of course you don't hear that on the mainstream news, do you? Many survivors speak of stepping, trampling, and even falling over many soft burning or smoke consumed bodies on the stairwell alone, and that was estimated to be about 60 to 100 people alone on the staircase. Yet the authorities officially reported so few deaths, and you don't hear them speaking about that either. Residents say that there are so many people still left unaccounted for. The whole building would have housed hundreds of people. Some say 200 to 300, others say more like 400, 500, 600. Why can't they reveal the correct number of residents? It is a council building after all, so they're only reporting low numbers. There are many people that have lost their children, parents or other family members or friends. It was reported that 65 people were rescued by firefighters and 74 people, 17 of which were in a critical condition, were confirmed to be in various hospitals. And at first they said only 6 people died, which is a bit of a ridiculous number. And then they said 17, and then by June 20th it was confirmed 79 had died or were missing. There are still many more unaccounted for, according to locals and residents of the tower, that the authorities are simply ignoring and excluding and not admitting and absolutely covering up. The residents and friends are making posters and stating that the numbers are much higher, but this is not being reported on main news outlets at all. The emergency response to the fire. So emergency services received the first report of the fire at 00:54, so 54 minutes past midnight. And also, that's suspicious to me, to be honest. When you look at the suspicious circumstances around this, which, I'll be discussing, and you can watch other videos, it's middle of the week, it's after midnight, so of course that is the most guaranteed time of people all being in the building. So for example, if someone did want to kill a lot of these people, if that was the case, Of course, that would be a time that you would choose because it would be a guarantee of all those people being in there, as opposed to like a Saturday night or a daytime when people are working. The fire brigade came 20 minutes after being called, and ambulances came much later. Tenants say that the fire brigade were reluctant to fight the fire at first. They didn't attack it until 2 to 3 a.m. Some say there were issues getting the fire hoses closer to the building. They also couldn't get into the building as the door was slammed shut until a resident handed their key. A tenant said by this time the right side of the building was engulfed completely in flames, but the left and middle side of the building, now that's where, the middle is where the one and only stairwell and exit is, and that looked clearer at that point. So it's hard to understand why more people couldn't be rescued at that time, because after that the fire went completely out of control. There were explosions, blue flames, it was a complete and utter inferno. And this was one of the concerns repeatedly raised by tenants, which I will also discuss further on. Gas pipes were fitted in the stairwell, which were extremely hazardous and temperamental. This was one of the fire safety hazards that the tenants had been complaining about before the fire, and there was only one stairwell for tenants to exit, so it was a complete death trap. The fire happened all up one side of the building where there was the one and only exit as well as the gas pipes. Doesn't that sound awfully deathly as well as suspicious? There was no other way out outside of plunging to one's death out of a steaming hot window of melting plastic. The tenants knew that the gas pipes were there in the stairwell, and that also made some of them reluctant to go down the stairs, knowing that they could explode or leak at any moment, but others took that risk. So many people actually died on the stairwell, and you have to ask, could toxic fumes from these pipes have added to the lethal smoke inhalation from the fire, and could there have been other toxins involved? As I'll discuss later, other toxins were proved to be involved, cyanide from the cladding. I'll talk about that later. There is another suspicious element that doesn't sit right with me. Only 2 days before the fire, there was some kind of inspection in the building. The inspectors knocked on all the doors and told residents that in the case of a fire, to stay inside their flats and to not try to escape. Doesn't that sound like a death trap to you? Obviously, this advice was fresh in their minds because only 2 days later the fire happened. And then this advice was given again by emergency services, who they were desperately calling, and the firefighters entering the building. And in the end, as we know, this safety instruction was the death trap and downfall of the people of Grenfell. Bystanders tried desperately to help. They wanted to get mattresses for people jumping, potentially jumping, and do whatever they can, but the police told them not to help. They said they were dealing with it. Later, people questioned this and have stated that they were pushed out and feel like they could have helped in some way because nothing was, being done. However, there was also the risk of falling debris to keep into consideration. Victims were given extremely ill advice by emergency services to stay inside their flats rather than escape, and this is something that caused many lives to be lost, and people are extremely angry about that. There were also stickers placed all over each block level that tenants would have seen every day that said clearly to stay put and keep in your flat in the case of a fire. So it was drummed into their heads. While people have praised the emergency services and hard-working firefighters, some of whom went against protocol and risked their lives to save people, there has also been criticism of why there was a helicopter that was only there to take photos and videos of the event for the news, for people to ogle at. Yet there were no rescue helicopters or planes carrying water or rescue equipment. Also, why weren't there any safety nets or some kind of equipment supplied for jumpers or, people falling to land on? Victims were falsely assured initially that they would be saved because they saw the firefighters, they heard all the emergency sirens outside, although no alarm went on in the building, and they saw heard the one helicopter, so they had this false hope. Little did they know that helicopter was only there to film them dying. During the fire, there was no emergency lighting that came on in the building, no sprinklers, no alarms, the lights were dead, At some point there was no water, so people couldn't even protect themselves in that way. So initially some people were turning the water on and filling up their baths and wetting towels and so on. At some point no one could do that.
In part 3, I talk about the after response from the government, further implications, prehistory facts about Grenfell, the residents, their complaints, the regeneration project, the cladding that ended up causing the fire to spread so terribly and quickly, and ending questions that we are left with.